Welcome to the Big Fat Gay Podcast, where we talk about things that are weighing on our minds. I am Trevor Keyson. I'm a super chub. I live in Los Angeles, and I am currently in a void where the election has not happened and has happened. So I guess I'm Schrodinger's fat.
My name is Michael. I am a chaser, and I too am in a similar void as Trevor, although my void is having not started my work yet and somehow also already finished it on Wednesday. And so I am, call me Schrodinger's dog today.
I am Don Marshall. I'm a big fat chubby guy living here in sunny Hollywood. And lacking an animal side, I guess I'm just Schrodinger. It's kind of sad, really.
That sounds lonely.
It is. I want to pet myself.
I'm Dan Oliverio. I'm a chubby chaser and a writer and public speaker. And I'm not Schrodinger. I am the Dirac delta function, who's going to give a large impetus to what needs to happen this week.
There's going to be a spike in searching for whatever that is.
I was just thinking, like, I can hear the Google engines being tapped into.
Clickety, 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 click. Yes.
I understood that reference. Yes. That is me.
Yes. So obviously this comes out on Wednesdays and we're recording on Monday. So we're in the fun space of who knows what happened. You know, listener, maybe you don't actually, because this is never going to end.
We are talking, of course, about tomorrow's elections.
Yeah. For
the time travelers in the future listening to us. Tomorrow we find out if we are facing Trump's second term or if we're going to get a president.
Well, we're going to vote on it. I don't know if we're going to find out much at all, but
yeah, it's a fun space to be in.
I just had like a visceral reaction to that statement. Just like my whole body went cold. And I got like sick to my stomach.
I'm sorry.
Let's not say that again.
That's
Don,
a little leftover Halloween terror for
bad
you.
Don.
Yeah.
Bad.
Thunderclap from last week.
Ends in a cat scare.
Yes. But yeah, so because, I mean, let's be honest, this whole year has been weird, but this is an especially weird time. So we thought we would do something a little different for this episode.
Yeah, so we wanted to do something that would be, I think, a little more uplifting and fun and different, and just kind of start this next chapter in all of our lives off on the right foot. So we wanted to talk to our special guest today. We have Chris Rosa on the show with us.
Welcome, Chris Rosa.
Hello. Hi guys. I love you guys all so much. You're so funny. I hope I can keep up. I'm intimidated.
yeah, so I'm not worried.
It's Chris, I have to ask. So this is the we're pre-quarantine times. We're on the our talk show set. What music plays as the sliding doors open and you kind of do your like little dance walk to the couch?
Stop and turn.
Okay, that's a tough question because there's multiple things to think about. Because I would say like a deep cut like Lady Gaga song, but like, you know, the moms at home don't know that. So and I would maybe say like an old school Madonna song, but that's not even where my vibe's at right now. So maybe like Just Dance by Lady Gaga. It's a song that I love, but also I think everyone else would get into, and it'd be a good like crowd pleaser for me to come on and talk about.
This one's across generations. That makes sense.
Can I explain? Can I give Chris a little bit of intro to explain why he is the world's most overqualified person to answer that question?
Please do, Dan. Why, Dan, who is this Chris Rosa?
So Chris and I go back a long time. I think, Chris, you and I met when you were just doing your internship in New York with VH1. Is that accurate?
Yeah. 2014. So that was, I was an intern at VH1. It was my second summer in New York. And yeah, we met when you were there over the summer. So a long time ago.
And so fast forward to currently, Chris is entertainment staff writer for Glamour magazine. A position which you've held for, I think, the last 4 years.
Yeah. I've been there since August 2016, and I love it. It's kind of my dream job, and I used to joke around in high school and middle school that I wanted a job where like talking about Britney Spears was just like part of what I got paid to do. And that's what I got. Yeah. So I'm very happy.
Well, and which is, I think, even more remarkable in that, you know, you've been working there for 4 years. You've only been out of college for 5 years.
Yes. Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is really remarkable is that you have this amazing job in, a glossy entertainment journalism profession while also being a fat femme gay man, which is how you referred to yourself in an article you wrote for Glamour last month.
Yeah. No, and that was something that I was really afraid of, that because, growing up, I watched The Devil Wears Prada and The Hills and all shows that I loved and watched and was religious about enjoying. But no one ever really looked like me on those shows. And if there was a gay guy on the show, one, it was rare. It was one gay guy, and he was like a thin, kind of sassy twink. So I didn't think there was ever going to be a place for me in magazines and fashion and entertainment. And I'm thankful that there is, and that a lot of the things I thought end up not being true at all.
So just to set this up a little bit for people, you also didn't grow up in New York City. You grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's where I'm from. And so even if I wasn't like a femme fat gay man wanting to move to New York and pursue a career in entertainment journalism is kind of unheard of. I'm kind of maybe one of 2 or 3 people I know from my hometown that left South Carolina in general to move to like LA or New York or somewhere else. So I was always a bit different. And then, of course, the body I grew up in just made things a little bit more, difficult to see that a dream could happen.
Well, in fact, I think I remember you saying that you didn't, like, you applied to VH1. I think it was an internship back then. You applied to it just on a lark, right? Or did you expect to get it?
Well, it was kind of a thing where it's weird. Growing up, I had kind of this duality of insane drive and crippling insecurity. So I knew that I wanted to do all these things, and I knew that I was good at them, and I knew that I don't think I would have been happy to do anything else, but I would apply to these things. And for instance, my first job was at MTV the summer before I met you. So this was 2013. And I got that internship, was super excited about it. But then the second I got it, I immediately was like, oh my God, but I'm fat. Do you know what I mean?
What if they find out?
What if they find out? I mean, that was a real thought, because it really was like, oh, I'm like, these are phone interviews, and what if I show up and I'm like this like big fat man, and they're like, get out of here, fat. You know what I mean? Like,
I totally understand your statement. 100%.
Yeah, your mind goes to the most illogical place, but it did go there. It absolutely did.
So being a fat person from the Midwest coming to Los Angeles, when I first kind of came, I never considered that when I was like doing job interviews and stuff. And I remember there was a job for a receptionist. It was an interview I was doing in Beverly Hills on Rodeo Drive at the salon. And I walked in and I immediately was like, oh no, like this is a completely different world than I was expecting. And like the kind of shock on the person I talked to's face at the counter when I was like, oh, I'm here for the interview. And they're like, oh. So I definitely relate to the kind of like anxiety and fear about that going to, these, I don't know.
Yeah.
It would seem like far off distant worlds.
Yeah. And even I remember my first day, more so at MTV than VH1, like walking in thinking like my secret's gonna get out the second I walk in there. That like the bubbly twink sounding gay guy that you hired looks a little bit different. And I really, really thought that was gonna fuck me up. I really did. Stupidly.
Well, did it take a while to realize that, like, oh my God, I think they maybe really do know? Like, how was it for you meshing those expectations with whatever the reality was, which you can also talk about?
It's weird because I'll talk about Glamour in a little bit. I had those anxieties going into Glamour too. So I really do think recently I've kind of gotten over it, but I think up until last year, or maybe even like 6 or 7 months ago, it really was kind of like fake it till I make it, which sounds really cliche and stupid. But I remember just showing up there, being as enthusiastic as I could, being as great as I could, thinking that maybe that was going to like make up for the fact that I was fat or hide the fact that I was fat. And looking back in hindsight, I think what I realized at 27, which I didn't at 20, was that no one really cared, but I cared. And I think because I cared, I was projecting a lot of things that weren't really there.
Well, let me ask you this question. One thing I've noticed with some of the fat guys that I've hired before and the fat women is we work harder when we first show up because I think we're overcompensating for our fears. So in one way, I mean, again, like trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, you know, that fear can actually be very useful for us. But I'm curious if, and I know you're saying you just had to do the fake it till you make it thing, but the issue you're talking about is a pretty universal one for most of us big guys. Do you have any advice for people on how to overcome that first day jitter on the new job when they're seeing your full body for the first time?
Surprise! Yeah, no.
Literally, just walk in and just shout that at the top of your lungs.
One thing that I found really helpful is fashion. And you guys have talked about this on your podcast before, is I really feel like if you have an outfit that you feel really good in, that alleviates, at least for me, 50% of the anxiety. Of course, there's the other 50%, but it gets rid of a good chunk of it. And with Glamour, I remember that was more so for my interview. I got the interview when I was 23. I didn't have a lot of money. And I remember going to DXL, which I'm sure you guys know all about, and spending money I didn't have on an outfit, but it ended up being money well spent because I got the job and I got this like blazer that I loved and these like pants that were like perfectly fitted and tailored. And again, like as a fat guy, I try to like hide my body, but I wanted pants that felt crisp and these really great shoes that I thought were really chic. And I showed up in that kind of like, I felt good in the outfit. So I wasn't constantly being like, how's my body look? I could kind of be present. So that really helped. And I also think it's another thing you guys have talked about on the podcast too, of thinking it's more in the context of like bars and friends and dates and stuff. You always think that as a fat person, everyone's thinking about your body and thinking about what you look like. And that's the same thing that goes to employees. Like no one's really thinking that. I mean, yes, weight discrimination is a thing and that does happen. I don't want to discredit it at all. But in some cases, it really isn't on people's minds. And that's one thing I just had to relax into and realize that maybe it's not as big of a deal as I'm making it in my head.
Something that you said that I think is really interesting when you got your outfit, when you're putting that together, it's your pregame interview. So what I'm hearing is that you were really picking clothes and thinking about how good you feel or how you want to feel or something that expresses you. It sounds like you were thinking about that more than you were thinking about like, okay, so what's the outfit that they're going to like or that's going to make me fit in there? Is that accurate?
Totally, 100%. I think that if I had gone with an outfit that felt very Condé Nast, which is what Glamour is owned by Condé Nast, it would have been something I think I would have been a little bit uncomfortable in. And so I wanted to find something that was a mix of like what feels like someone would work at a fashion magazine would look like, but also what's my personal style. And again, these are all just preconceived notions I had about the company. Now I wear whatever I want and everyone wears whatever they want. And like, I know, and I could have done that from the start, but of course in my mind, I'm thinking I've got to look like someone who, you know, the Devil Wears Prada, and I've got to like somehow fit this mold in this body. How do I do that as best as I can? And quickly I realized that I didn't need to do that. I could have kind of course, like dressed for an interview, but I didn't need to fit anything other than just being as comfortable as I could have been. And that's really the key to clothes for a situation like that is what's going to put me the most at ease so I can be present in what we're talking about and not thinking like, do they think I'm fat? Do you know what I mean?
That's really brilliant. Yeah.
I have gone to meetings wearing clothing that friends told me like, oh, you look amazing in this, but they hang on the wrong spots. And so I'm focusing on that during the meeting rather than,
And one thing I think is this is a really hyper specific fat guy problem is I never want to have a shirt. First, I used to do a thing where I would kind of drown my body in clothes that were too big, but I don't like the way I look like that. But I also don't want to be in clothes where I'm doing this all the time, because then I'll be thinking about that.
You mean pulling the clothes away from your body?
Pulling the clothes away from my body. And I realized like we're audio. I was pulling my shirt. I was pulling my shirt, as I'm sure all of you have done before. I didn't want an outfit where I was doing that. So it all just came to finding the right fit of clothes, and I was lucky to have found an outfit that really worked.
Nice. And by the way, what was that outfit? I mean, you said blazer, but what were the components?
I'm actually curious how many times you changed before you settled on that outfit.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
Well, it was a Michael Kors blazer. It was this bluish, this like darkish blue that I loved. That was perfectly fitted. Again, I would get it old body, like 2 sizes too big to just like hide my body. And then it was a simple black shirt and these gray kind of jean, I call them like cool Brooklyn guy pants. Like they just looked like something like a cool guy from Brooklyn would wear. And the guy at DXL like perfectly tailored it for me. And I just felt really good. And I went with 2 girlfriends, female friends. And I even remember being a little afraid to go with them because I was like, surprise, I'm fat. I have to shop at this store. You know what I mean? And so, but they came and were so great and helped me pick out the clothes. And it was the first outfit I ended up picking. I don't think I tried on anything else. And it's an outfit I still wear today. I have the pants, I have the blazer. I mix and match it whenever I want. And it really is, I'll always remember that those clothes is just really what helped me and what helped me like get over the anxiety that I realized I didn't even need to have. I love the people I work with at Glamour, and it's not at all the culture I thought it was.
That's good to hear. And the other thing I heard you say is you got it tailored. Like you didn't just,
Oh yeah.
And you expected to get it tailored, right? You didn't think you were going to. Yeah.
Well, that's the great thing. Again, I think this is a recent revelation for me of going to stores that carry my sizes. I feel much more emboldened to, going to any other like kind of like American Eagle store, like in college, like I kind of would just grab the biggest size and pray it fit and just get it. You know what I mean?
and rush out.
And rush out and be like, sorry, I'm here. Sorry, I'm fat. You know what I mean? Like that, yeah. But going to a store like DXL or some of the stores online I shop at, I feel much more emboldened to make choices that feel good like any other person deserves to feel. And that was key at that job. And I think I even wore that outfit on the first day. Or I wore the blazer. Maybe I wore different pants, but it's an outfit that I still wear and return to all the time.
You made an interesting comment about going to the DXL with some friends and sort of being mortified about that.
Mm-hmm.
I up until you said that, it never occurred to me that only one time in my life have I had someone with me while I picked up some clothing, and that was Michael. And I can't remember what I was buying, but even with Michael there, I was sort of mortified that someone was looking at me in clothes that I have not approved of yet. And much less being in this very specific store for me. I mean, is that an experience you continue doing? The social experience of shopping with friends, or is that still something that's weird for you?
Well, I love shopping on principle. Not even if I even if I wasn't fat, I don't think I would enjoy shopping. It makes me very thirsty. I don't know if you guys I just like want to drink like a million fluids, and so I remember being like growing up and going to the store with my mom, hating it. So I shop as little as I can, but I would do it now. And also ASOS is a great brand that has extended sizing, and I have no problem like showing like friends clothes that I'm thinking about buying, or even, a little bit in answer to your question is recently I went to a friend's gay bachelor party, and he was like, I want to get t-shirts made. Like, will you send me your size? And I, for some reason, was so afraid to do that and be like, this is my shirt size. Then when I know all of his friends are like a medium at most. And, but I just like sent the size. He was like, okay. And like got it made. And again, whatever I had built up in my head was going to happen didn't happen. And that extends to like the job stuff as well. Like I remember like walking into Glamour thinking like, I know they know what I look like, but everyone's going to see me and they're going to fire me. Or even VH1, like the summer before I met Dan, I remember distinctly walking at my college when I got the job thinking, okay, now I have to lose 30 pounds in a month. Do you know what I mean? Just like really, really, really crazy things. And none of it, all of it was kind of for naught, I think.
You've talked a lot about, expectation versus reality. I wonder, have you ever had a situation, maybe in an interview or maybe in an assignment, where being, a big fat, big gay man was an advantage or something that turned,
I was curious about the same thing.
Well, first off, I'm going to put big fat, big gay man in my Twitter bio. So thank you for that.
Always happy to serve, Chris. Always happy to serve.
In that order.
Oh, all the time. I mean, that's kind of what I was excited to talk about, was the culture of what I thought magazines were is not what it is, at least from my experience. And I've talked to enough people and seen enough brands to know that it's not the case. Maybe magazines 20 years ago hated fat people, but now, your perspective, your very specific perspective is kind of why you get hired. And not to say like I wouldn't have gotten the job if I wasn't fat or whatever. I think that my edit test as a writer was very strong. And I'm an entertainment writer at the end of the day. I write about books and TVs and movies. And so my fat experience isn't always a part of what I write about, but it has been in many cases. A perfect example was the piece I just did on the Fenty show. I was looking for a take on it, and I saw Dexter Mayfield's kind of like bravura like dance, and I was like, wow, that was really amazing. And then I looked on the website and saw that there was like a fat man on like the e-commerce site, and I had never seen that before. A guy with like man boobs that looked like mine and stretch marks and flab and presented in this very sexy, beautiful way. I don't think anyone else would have noticed that at Glamour except me, and I wrote the piece, and it ended up performing super well and being it was one of our highest traffic pieces of the week, I think, maybe even in the month. So I do think that my perspective in the body I am informs a lot of the work that I do. And had I known that, I don't think I would have been as afraid to go out for the job. Had I known it would help me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's something that you return to a lot, is this idea of, you say that you were hired, in fact, for your voice, and that today more and more writers are not hired just to report. They're hired to give perspective, to give analysis on whatever it is. And so I wonder, were you ever tempted to try to fit in more, or were you always of that mindset of like, just gotta be me? Was it, how was that for you? Was there a struggle for it? Was it just from the opening of the gates? How did that work for you?
That's a really good question. I think I probably when I started, there was a couple of months where I would like walk into the elevator and see like what the other gay guys looked like, and none of them looked like me. I actually only know one kind of, I'm not going to say his name, but like one kind of like chubby guy who works in media who does what I do, like literally only one, and he doesn't even work at Condé Nast. So there was some time where I would look around and think I didn't belong here, and I would go to events like cocktail hours and movie screenings, and I've never been to a fashion show, but industry events, like press trips, and would kind of see what everyone would look like and think, this is how I look, and it doesn't look like them, and should I be here? I would start spiraling. I would, all those things. Again,
I call that the treadmill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's not even like I had a light bulb, like love yourself moment. It was more, it was kind of just, again, and I feel like I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry. All the things, and I can only speak from my perspective. I cannot. I don't want to say that what happened to me was normal, or that worse things haven't happened to other guys who are fat and who have been in the workplace. All the things I was worried about, I would just start talking to people like I would talk to anyone. We'd get into a conversation. I would build a connection. I would build a friendship. I would build a work friendship, and it all kind of melted away. And I think the key to that, at least for me, was just like an inch of willingness to start a conversation, because maybe someone wouldn't have started a conversation with me. Maybe I had to be the one to do it. And that could be for a multitude of reasons. But it was just an inch of being like, hey, what's up? And then, talking about something common and establishing ground, and then following each other on Twitter and following each other on Instagram and seeing that we have the same interests and want to talk about Kim Petras and Lady Gaga. You know what I mean? So that is kind of the key. Just if I just had to find an inch, a sliver of willingness to just step out of my comfort zone and just say hi. But that's really hard. It can be really hard when you live in a body like mine and think that you think that you shouldn't get things, that you don't deserve things.
It reminds me of a friend of mine who, he's cute and blonde. He is absolutely a twink if twinks weighed 400 pounds. And he would go out in West Hollywood to a really swanky high-end gay bar, and he would get play. And all the other fat guys, who weren't going, were like, oh my God, how did you do that? How'd you pick up that really hot guy at the Abbey? How'd you, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I don't know. I just talked to them. But I think what I saw was going on was that he was actually more part of that gay world than I was, because like you, he was really plugged into like fashion and celebrity and entertainment stuff, which, my fellow co-host will attest that I am really, really bad at. But he swam in those waters. And so I think for the guys he was talking to, and maybe this is true of your experience in, at the cocktail party, it's like, well, he's a lot bigger than the people we usually talk to, but he's one of us.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I remember you telling me that story a couple of years ago, and it's really resonated with me. Even in just my personal life, like I kind of navigate, I think this is like what I need to call my book or something if I ever write a book. Like I am definitely a twink. I'm a twink in a fat guy's body, because all my friends are very small guys, and any gay coworkers I have kind of look like that. And I'll go to like the twink when the world's normal. I haven't been in a while. Like we'll go to like the twink clubs and the twink bars, because that's the music I like. Those are the conversations I like having. I love talking shop about pop music and pop culture. But the guys don't look like me. And I used to be afraid of like walking into those spaces and thinking like I'm going to get kicked out because I'm fat. Do you know what I mean? and that's never been the case. And even like I started thinking about, if someone's looking at me, maybe they're looking at me because they think I'm hot. Maybe they're not looking at me because like, what is that like rhinoceros doing in the corner? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And a perfect example was a couple of weeks ago. I did end up going to this kind of like seated masks, outdoor socially distant thing with a couple friends. And I did have a very good looking, conventionally hot kind of Instagram guy, start talking to me. And we were talking about Lady Gaga's new album and the songs we liked off of it. And he followed me on Instagram. And I had I have very, very good friends, very protective friends who love me and have never said a thing about my body and think I'm sexy, blah, blah, blah. But he did storm up to me after. He was like, who was that guy? Was he like talking? Was he like rude to you? And I was like, no, he was hitting on me. You know what I mean? And
that's great.
And it was kind of like this kind of revelation of like, maybe it's not all so bad. And maybe I can go to a fashion party at work and talk to the hot twink in the corner, not even in a sexual context, and they're not going to like pull out the harpoons. Do you know what I mean?
That's really great.
Yeah.
I'm always convinced they have harpoons.
Yeah.
Ready there.
Just waiting. They have it in their bag, just waiting,
I had, it's just, you're talking about clothing, right? And clothing giving you this sort of sense of, I don't want to say armor, but like being able to project yourself forward the way you want to.
Totally.
Right? Now, but it's funny because when we talk about this sort of low self-esteem that we get growing up, I think the common line of thought in mainstream media is to blame fashion, right? To say that fashion tells us the bodies we have to have. I'm curious if you feel that way. Like, what do you think are the contributors to this sort of difficulty we can have in just feeling that we have the right to be where we want to be?
I really do think that 70% of it, I do think 30% of it is your own internal journey. But I think that is absolutely empowered and affected, almost directly affected by the other 70%, which I do think is representation. I think that if I was just talking about this the other day to a chaser, and he was talking about his sexuality and how, you know, how he never felt like he could be open about it because it was kind of taboo. And we've never seen a fat guy be sexualized on TV in a context that would make you think it's okay to be attracted to someone who looked like that. I think exactly the thing applies to fashion and clothes. If we grew up seeing, you know, Kevin James or whoever, that's the only example I can think of, like in a chic Hugo Boss outfit, right in GQ, along with like, you know, Brad Pitt and Ben Affleck in a best dressed of the Oscars night, it would just be normalized in our fashion tastes, and we would just be emboldened to be more chic and embrace fashion in a way that we just don't now.
Well, I think that's why your Fenty article was so popular, because that Fenty show was really the first time where fat male bodies have been showcased. Like the Fenty website was, I think, more representation than we see on like DXL.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like DXL,
So
it's the same,
So
like tall, like kind of fat, scruffy guy who's like, you know, fashionable, but also all American and like not too fat.
They look like a lumberjack.
Yeah.
Yes.
I call them rugby.
Very tall lumberjacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think so, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think the fashion industry is solely responsible, but they do put out certain images. Like, what do you think the fashion industry could do something different to be more inclusive? Do you think that's their responsibility at all? Or is that on us? Like, do we need to sort of change our own point of view?
It's tough. I do think that, I mean, I can only speak from, you know, the perspective of like working in a magazine. I do think it's our responsibility to be as inclusive as possible in our coverage. And I mean, even it's not exactly the same thing, and I don't want to make a direct comparison, but even looking at like race representation and, you know, especially all the conversations that were happening over the summer. And I took a long, hard look at Glamour's coverage and the spots where I could be better. You know, my day-to-day is celebrity news, covering celebrity news. And why do we have 15 articles about Blake Lively and only Blake Lively? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, so it becomes a thing where you just start thinking, well, maybe it is my responsibility to like broaden my scope and like make sure I'm as inclusive as possible. And I think that extends to brands as well. I think that if they're casting the same Cara Delevingne-esque model in all their campaigns, or in DXL's case, the same rugby looking plus size model, I could name two, you know, then we're not going to get anywhere. I do think that there is a lot of responsibility on editorial brands and fashion brands to like make their lineups look like the world, because that is, I think, how you just kind of set yourself free from the parameters that maybe you had set for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, you know, there used to be a thing back in the days when Will and Grace was something new and different. There was a thing called homophobophobia, which was a phenomenon, particularly in Los Angeles, which was, you know, if you were a TV executive, you're like, I'm fine with gay people, but I'm worried about the people who are worried about gay people. Like, I'm afraid of the people who are afraid of gay people because they'll tank our ratings. Do you think there is a sense of fatophobophobia in maybe the environment you work in, or in fashion today, or in celebrity? Like, we're like, it's okay with us if you're fat, but we're afraid of the backlash of the people who won't accept it where our magazines are published or where our media shows.
That's a good question. I think from an internet editorial perspective, one thing that does cross my mind when I either write articles about fat representation or being fat is that the comments are going to be berated with obesity, health, blah, 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 blah. And I can't speak from like an advertisement perspective or that kind of side of it, because I don't work with that. But I do know that that is something that crosses my mind. And it's kind of like when you choose to write an article about like how Trump sucks, like you're going to get the haters, you're going to get the blowback, but like, wouldn't you rather be on the right side of history and publish something right side of history? Like, this is like, you know, wouldn't you rather have, sometimes you just have to make a choice that's going to upset people, but it's for the greater good. And also, you know, there's great comments too that come from it. So it's a mix, but I won't say the backlash doesn't exist, because it does. And I think that we still have a long way to go.
I have a theory. That there's a type of person out there that can't, what's the best way to explain this? They can't feel their own height. So they feel it's necessary to stand on someone else in order to feel tall. I don't think that's true of all humanity, but I do think there's a type of person that if someone they believe should be beneath them is being put in a position where it doesn't seem that they are, they feel the need to try and push them back down so they can get back on top of them.
I have so much to say about that, but the quickest thing to say is, yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, that's one thing that has crossed my mind the times that I've had negative experiences. I think that so many people spend their lives terrified of being fat. I think that's like, for some people, it's the worst possible thing that could possibly happen to you. That when someone comes across that is emboldened to wear whatever they want or take their shirt off in Fire Island or what have you, they get pissed off because they don't think they have the right to do that. They diet and exercise and kill themselves at the gym to look a certain way, to earn the right to do something, to earn the right to have a kind of job or have a kind of life. And I think that for the first time in my entire life, the past year or two, I've said, just fuck that. You know what I mean? Honestly, I can't, like, I've gone to Fire Island, like the fattest I've ever been this summer. And I had a great time. Again, it was like coronavirus. So I wasn't like at any circuit parties or anything, but it's like, you know, things that I didn't think I could do or had permission to do. I just said, why not? You know, and that started with my job.
If I could make the suggestion, Fuck That is also another great book title. Yeah. Just keep that in mind. Just pitching that.
I like how you said that, like doing things you didn't think you had the permission to do. Mm-hmm. That's really awesome, including like applying for a job, you know.
Totally. Yeah. And that I remember distinctly in January of 2016 seeing a job at Teen Vogue, and again, Teen Vogue is super progressive and write about fat representation, and they're amazing. I didn't know any of that in 2016. And all I knew is there was a job at Teen Vogue, and I know Teen Vogue from The Hills, again, a show that I worshipped growing up. And I had a friend send me the listing, and he was like, you really should apply to this. And I was like, well, I want to lose like 75 pounds first, so maybe no. I swear to God, yeah, I did do that. And then thankfully 6 months later, a job popped up at Glamour, and it was a mix of me being so fed up at my current job, my last job, and so wanting to get out of there, and just like having to swallow whatever insecurity I had just to get out of that job. And I was like, I don't have time to lose 75 pounds to change my career. I don't have time.
I think that's so perfect.
I really do love how woke Teen Vogue has become. And I feel like 2016 was like kind of the start of it. And it's just so amazing because you never would have thought these amazing kind of think pieces would be coming from Teen Vogue, because it's like, you know, I had built this, well, it's like Vogue and then like Teen Vogue. So I'd kind of built this image in my head of like that I would never see anything kind of fat positive from Vogue, let alone Teen Vogue.
Absolutely. Speaking of Vogue, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there's a show on Netflix called Emily in Paris. That was a huge talking point. It's a great show. You absolutely should watch. There's not a single fat person in it, but it's great. But Vogue of all outlets wrote a piece called "What If Emily in Paris Was Fat?" And it was kind of exploring.
Oh my God.
Oh shit. That I would read that. I'm curious.
And it was exploring the idea of like this sort of Paris girl, American girl in Paris. You've got Carrie Bradshaw, you've got the Gossip Girl cast, these wayfish blonde girls running around Paris. Why does that? And then of course in Emily in Paris, it's Lily Collins, who's great in the show. It's no shade towards her whatsoever. But why does that fantasy only get to belong to a girl who's 100 pounds? Why can't it belong to a girl who's 300 pounds? Why can't it belong to a gay guy who's 300 pounds? I want to be Emily in Paris.
Oh my God, yes. Chris, I would pay to watch you be Emily in Paris.
Season 2, my friend. Season 2.
Hire me. So yeah, but no, Trevor, I completely agree with you. I think that had I known all of that about Teen Vogue or what Teen Vogue would have become, I probably would have applied to that job. But I was too scared and too set in what I thought the industry was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that actually leads me to an interesting question that I thought, well, I think it's an interesting question, because sometimes we get in our heads and we treat the world of our head like it's the world outside our head.
Mm-hmm.
How does this hit you? Like, how would you describe the difference between like what you were describing at Teen Vogue of like, oh, I'll never get that, they'd never hire me, versus maybe a different sort of consideration, which is like, that sounds great, but it's not my tribe and I don't think I belong there. Or is there a difference?
Yeah. I do think there is a difference. Well, actually, I think that there is something to be said about, I don't want to apply to that because that's not my tribe, but I don't think they're not my tribe because I'm fat, if that makes any sense. I think that there would be for instance, like, I don't think I could ever work I don't want to I'm not going to name any places because, girls got to eat, but like, there are some outlets that I probably wouldn't want to work at because I just think, oh, it's too snarky. Oh, it's too this. It's like, I don't fit in. I wouldn't fit in well with that culture. That's not because I'm fat. It's just because it's just, and I think now I'm in a place to think that. I think probably 5 years ago, I would have thought I had no seat at any table because of my weight. But now I think there's a host of other reasons why some other job isn't my tribe that has nothing to do with weight. And that's been a really empowering, nice place to be in my mind.
Nice.
It's interesting. What you were saying just reminded me of a tip that Trevor brought a couple weeks ago, where it was a Kickstarter for a new brand of jeans, where the jeans were being designed based on was it a 4X body, 5X body, 52-inch waist, something like that?
Yeah, I think it was 52-inch waist.
Right. Mm-hmm. At which point I discovered for the first time that apparently large men's clothing is not designed using large men.
Of course not.
Just they take the small people's clothing and just enlarge it, right? Which doesn't work. So I just think it's interesting. Now that we have that pair of jeans going onto the market, trying to add a little diversity to us, and having people like you writing and bringing your perspective, we can see the diversity starting to come in.
I think it's a slow but steady process. That just reminded me I did a profile on, I don't know if you guys watched that show Euphoria last year. It was really good. It was on HBO. I did a profile on Barbie Ferreira. She played a plus size character on the show who starts a webcam sex show and is very sexual and uninhibited, and she's a model. She's a plus size model and a very popular one. And she told me something really interesting that a lot of times plus size models aren't plus size, they just have padding on them because they get straight size models because they want that hourglass shape. They want the boobs and the shapely curves, but they don't want flab, I guess. I don't know a more eloquent way of putting it. But she said she's encountered things where they'll get maybe the smallest kind of plus size model, a 12 or whatever, and just put padding on her so that it's more of an hourglass shape. And that kind of speaks to what you're saying about people are fine with diversity, but it's got to be the kind of diversity they're okay with looking at, if that makes any sense.
Oh, 100%.
I wrote a piece of This Is Us is a really big popular show by Glamour. We'd write about it a lot. And I do enjoy it. I think it's really good. I think I love to cry. I'm a big crier. But I do think that one thing I would love to see is them not talk about Chrissy Metz's weight that much on the show. And I think that in the first season, maybe they thought they had to do it, to address the issue in the room or what have you. But I wish it would kind of just be a thing where they don't talk about it. And I think maybe culturally we're at a place where kind of where we were with gay people on screen. The first narratives you saw with gay people on screen were they have HIV, their lives are terrible. They're struggling to come out of the closet, where, they're going to have horrible, terrible lives. And then Will and Grace came on that showed an affluent, successful gay man with no issues with being gay. Maybe that's the journey with fat narratives on TV. Maybe right now we have to be fat, but maybe in 10 years you won't have that.
That has been the pattern with all sort of minority representation. Is first you show up as backgrounds, Then you show up as an object of pity or scorn. Then you show up as a villain, and then you start getting to be a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what minority group you're talking about, you can see that. And with like the fat mob boss and the fat like corrupt politician, fat corrupt anything, like fat has been the villain for a really long time. So I feel like we're ready to move on to the next phase.
Yes, please.
Of representation. So my little rant.
Cool.
I'm curious, Chris, is there anything that specifically you wish we'd asked you?
No.
That's always my favorite question to ask people at the end of interviews.
This was so...
All the pressure's on you.
No, honestly, I'm just at a place now where, I've attempted to write about this topic for a very long time. I haven't always gotten it right. I think because I was personally going through a lot of issues with my body, accepting it, and really for the first time maybe ever, I am so completely just at ease with how things are that I'm excited to talk about these topics in a very kind of stream of consciousness way. So just to hop on here for like 45 minutes to talk about this has been a thrill. And, I would do it for 2 more hours, but I know you probably has got more things to get into. It can't be all about me. Not yet.
Michael usually starts crying around 90 minutes in.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for being on our show. And it's just been a delight.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've had a great time, and I can't wait to listen to more, and just really appreciative you guys even want to have me on here. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Much appreciated.
Where can people find you?
You can follow me on Twitter at ChrisRosa92. I stupidly made that when I was in college, and now I hate that the year I was born is in it, but that's it. And then my Instagram is Chris.Rosa92. So the dot is the difference between Instagram and Twitter.
And also, if you want to read a bunch of Chris's articles, if you go to Glamour's website, you can find him as the author, and you get a whole dossier of all the stories he's written for Glamour.
And if anyone is single, my number is 806. I'm just
Get in line, bucko.
Operators are standing by now.
And that was the lovely Chris Rosa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I was pretty quiet this episode, but it was because I was really enjoying just like listening to the interview, and I kind of got swept up in like hearing all the questions and Chris talking, and it was also kind of nice for me because I've been kind of like getting to the point of burnout just with like work and everything, and I need a little break. I never really got to have a break when we took our hiatus because we were still editing mini episodes. So at my sort of request, I'd like to take the month of Thanksgiving.
It is a month of Thanksgiving.
Turkey every day, cranberry sauce for lunch, stuffing for dinner.
Yeah. To take the month of November off to just give myself a little bit of a break while I have a huge sort of workload coming up. And it was really nice to have Chris on today because I got to sort of start that a little bit early and be a listener for once.
I think we're going to, for the rest of November after this, release some classic TM.
Yeah, hits.
Re-release some classic hits. Revisit simpler times.
Yeah.
Reflect on the good old days, and we'll be back
in December.
December.
Early December.
Beginning of December, we'll come back fresh. And
hopefully when we come back, we'll be recording in a better world.
Yes.
With more hope and more prosperity and more belief in our systems.
Or we'll still be counting the ballots. It'll be everyone is they're spread out on the floor, and everyone in America is helping count.
Like everybody looking for
America.
somebody's lost contact lens. Yeah.
But if you need an additional fix of Big Fat Gay Podcast while we're gone, Trevor, where can they go for that?
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Big Fat Gay Pod. We're on Facebook as the Big Fat Gay Podcast.
Yes. That is correct.
Leave us 5 stars there. Leave us 5 stars on Apple and Stitcher. See all the lovely resources. We'll link to Chris's stuff at www.bigfatgaypod.com. Yeah, so maybe you're listening in the void, and there's just a little
Ballot behind you.
a ballot behind you and a box on the floor where all this noise is coming from, and you decide to open it up, and surprise, it's us. I'm a fat little cat.
I'm a hanging Chad.
Yeah, Michael's a dog, and Dan is a complex theory of reality. So
Look out, everybody.
2020, it's still happening.
It's still going on. Bye, everybody.